Hey, this is Neil Prasad recording from so-called New York City, and I'm sitting here with, would you like to tell everyone your name?
I'm Katerina.
Katerina, nice to meet you, Katerina. So where are we right now in New York City?
So we are at Abolition Park, formerly known as New York City Hall. Specifically, you're sitting in front of the Abolition Library Commons, which we've been keeping here for a couple of weeks. I believe that this is now the 19th or 20th day at the camp, which is very exciting. We're really lucky, we're happy to be here.
That's wonderful. Getting up on 3 weeks now, it's really impressive.
Yeah, it's very close.
So, what's been the response from City Hall thus far to this liberation of the park?
So initially the first week, a lot of police presence and a lot of police attempts to shut us down. We had two attempted raids. Since then, and that was in the lead up to the budget vote, so this encampment was originally convened with a narrow demand to ask for slicing at $1 billion off the NYPD's officially $6 billion, actually $11 billion budget.
Actually, how much?
Actually, $11 billion.
$11 billion for the NYPD.
Yes, it is $6 billion per year, but then the city pays $5 billion more in benefits and pensions, and then $500 million more to maintain their vehicles, and $500 million more to pay out their lawsuits. So it's actually closer to $12 billion. But so that was the initial reason for convening this protest camp, and it brought a lot of people together. And it was a black-led encampment. It remains a black-led encampment. And the people who, even though some of the people who originally started it are no longer here, right now we have transitioned into kind of a different project. Since the last raid, the police have not tried to push us out. Our impression is that they're waiting for us to fall apart through refusing to care for each other and through abandoning each other, and our response to that is to care for each other and to refuse to abandon each other.
That's excellent. And how have people reacted to just this space opening up? How have people contributed food or labor or other things?
So yeah, I mean, I think people have responded very enthusiastically and with a great deal of excitement, knowing even people who were initially skeptical of, again, like the narrowness of, and like no disrespect to the people who originally called for this action, because they did like amazing work, but just like people who were initially skeptical of the narrowness of that demand, right? Even people who wanted to ask for much more came here, and they donated food and they donated supplies. We have a lot of resources, right? And one thing that we have been trying to make sure that keeps going is the reproductive care that it takes to maintain this camp. And so that's things like sanitation and laundry and food, and making sure that people can get to the bathroom, because currently we don't have that on site. And like a number of other things, basically like things that have to be done every day that are very like unsexy work, but absolutely essential, and that are essential part of any protest camp. And that various members, even though the library doesn't really do that directly, we've been like all of our volunteers have been taking part in that too.
Okay. So what has been some of the response and coverage from like the mainstream media?
I think it typically they have responded extremely poorly. They have especially responded poorly by witnessing that this camp is now a mix of demonstrators with and without housing, with and without somewhere else to go. There was a really fucking horrible article in the New York Times yesterday that was basically like whose headline was "Homeless Movement Bringing Disorder."
Homeless movement bringing disorder. That was the headline on the New York Times article.
Our Occupy struggles as homeless movement bringing disorder, and we think that's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
It is certainly the case that many of the people here have a lot of needs, because everybody has a lot of needs, right? To the extent that we are having challenges, those have to do with the really miserable world outside of this park, and that people have been forced out of their homes. They have been brutalized by the police. They've been incarcerated. They are long-term drug users. Maybe they're HIV positive, right? They have been variously abandoned by the state and capital. And so when they are here, they come bringing those needs like we all do, right? And so as our response, the response of many committed organizers here is, one, to recognize that these people are local residents, not the property owners, right? These people are local residents in this area because they live here, right? They've lived here before this campus here. And the reason why they're here is, I mean, you can ask them, you shouldn't ask me, but like, you know, as they told me, is that this place is safe around a lot of shelters. There's food, there's protection from police harassment. They can no longer sleep on the subways overnight because Cuomo shut down the subway, like has a subway shutdown from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. Which
that's due in response to the pandemic?
Theoretically, it was in response to the pandemic. I think my cynical opinion is that it was actually an attempt to clear unhoused people off of the subways. So you know, like, the community here is based on the mix that combination of solidarity and needs. And we believe in linking together the projects of mutual aid and abolition, and that is something that we have talked a lot about amongst ourselves. And we are doing that work to bring people together under situations of extreme crisis and sometimes conflict.
I'm just going to check on the camera super quick.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're at about the 7-minute mark, so I just want to take a couple more minutes. Thank you so much again for your time, Katerina. Whenever conflicts do occur, what are the non-violent ways of resolving conflicts without police intervention?
Right. So we have a mental health team on site. They've been doing really great work, both in terms of de-escalating conflict and also teaching us, everyone here, better communication skills, better ways to talk to each other, talking across like very different like linguistic abilities and uses of language and understandings. We had to have a very long conversation among everyone here about like, you know, when there's a conflict, not everybody has to be there. Because people tend to, you see something and you just tend to go over there, and that doesn't help, right?
Right.
So we are learning that, you know, we can de-escalate ourselves. We can bring energy away from high conflict situations. We can get people to like go and like walk it off. Sometimes people have to leave the camp, then they come back and we can talk it out. This is ongoing. I don't want to say it's always been easy because it hasn't. And I don't want to say that it's always worked out well because we are dealing with like a series of very complicated situations. But like people are developing those strategies, and we know that because the crises that we're living through, economic and ecological, will only make it harder, right, for the people to have access to the means of life. We know that these kinds of communities and this necessity of community building under great experience of crisis is only going to be more important. Yeah. And it can be that at the same time as it is also committed to the political ideal of being opposed to prisons and police, because we know that they do not keep us safe.
And it's all so intertwined. You've raised so many excellent points about building up mutual aid in these communities under duress, about teaching the skills of active listening and nonviolent communication so we can resolve things without the courts and police and prisons. Yeah. I guess I can ask maybe two more questions. One is, we are still going through this pandemic of virus, you know, outside of the pandemics of structural racism and capitalism and statism.
Yeah.
What precautions have been taken to help protect people from COVID-19 since this started?
It's a great question. I mean, we have a lot of PPE on site, always. We have hand sanitizer on site, always. I was helping to get a really big order of that brought in today. We have really strict rules for sanitation around the food. You can't come near it. I mean, we ask you not to come near it, if you don't have a mask on, you know, like that. These things are like very are you know, like pretty. They are community guidelines that people are actually pretty good at upholding. Which is not something that I'll say for the tourists sitting in restaurants, you know, a mile that way, right?
Yeah.
Who seem to think that they are fine with like jeopardizing everybody's safety so they can have an experience,
Yep.
right? And the answer is like, you know, we are taking care of each other and yeah, like masks up and sanitizing and cleaning surfaces, and also because we are outdoors, it is a relatively lower risk environment in terms of transmission, and we know that. At the same time as like, you know, as we continue here and as the weather changes, we're obviously going to like adapt to just make sure that we're keeping everybody safe.
Just for everyone who's going to be watching this video, do you have a message to the folks outside who have their eyes on New York City and what y'all are doing here?
Do I? Yes. Free them all. Nobody should be forced to live in a cage. Everybody deserves housing, especially when this country has way more empty houses than people who need housing. And that if you are looking here and you see like, oh, there are tarps up, and you see that as a symptom of social disorder, you haven't really been paying attention to the world that creates disorder and scarcity, by way of to a world that creates disorder and scarcity, that produces disorder and scarcity, but makes it look very clean and tidy and ordered. Yes. It is a false impression. It's a false understanding.
Yo, Katrina, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me right now. I really, really appreciate it.
Cheers, I appreciate it too. So take care.